Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Parallel Deku. Back with another fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Played the Villain in the Civil War Game. Now before starting, please give this video a like. And subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Izuku felt a sense of foreboding as he gathered with his classmates. Something was off, and the presence of drones filming them only heightened his anxiety. He noticed the students from Class 1A, 1B, the support course, and the general studies course all around him. The atmosphere was tense, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something troubling was about to unfold. Nezu announced that this year's Civil War game would be different. It would be filmed live for audiences around the world. He emphasized the importance of speaking only English during the game and began to explain the rules, referencing a rule book that everyone would need to follow. Recovery Girl expressed her outrage at the lack of prior notice about the changes. Izuku sensed that someone was going to be in serious trouble. Nezu clarified the first rule: no killing or causing serious injury. He wanted to ensure that no student would end up needing a prosthetic limb after the game. Excitement buzzed among the students as they began to discuss their roles. Izuku felt a surge of determination. He believed he would be a hero in this game. Little did they know the extent of his knowledge and capabilities. Nezu continued, explaining that students could vote to identify potential villains among them. 2 students would play the role of the villain, tasked with eliminating the others. If someone suspected another student of being a villain, they could call a meeting to present their evidence, allowing the accused a chance to defend themselves before a vote was taken. The thrill of manipulation sparked in Izuku's mind. He imagined the possibilities if he were the villain. Nezu then distributed cards to everyone, marking the beginning of the game. Later, Nezu reflected on his mistake. He had carefully planned the event, but in a moment of oversight, he had switched roles, making Shinso a hero instead of a villain. With the game already live-streamed, he realized he could not correct this error without exposing himself. Cameras were capturing every moment, and he was left to discover the identity of the second villain alongside everyone else. As drones hovered above UA, recording the students' preparations, Nezu worried about the potential fallout. If the villain turned out to be someone like Bakugo, Ida, or Midoriya, it could lead to chaos. Bakugo's temperament would make him a prime suspect, while Ida and Midoriya would likely turn themselves in. He needed to maintain control over the situation, but the stakes were higher than he had anticipated. Meanwhile, Izuku examined his card in disbelief. He was the villain. The realization sent a rush of excitement through him. Scanning the area, he considered who the second villain might be. Eraserhead appeared more somber than usual, and Izuku speculated that the second villain would likely be a hero. The presence of Endeavor and Hawks added to the thrill of the game. He envisioned manipulating Todoroki into believing his father was the villain, potentially eliminating both of them early on. The voting aspect of the game also played to his advantage. Izuku had made an effort to connect with students from other classes, complementing their quirks and fostering positive relationships. His strategy was to avoid suspicion and remain in the game as long as possible. The anticipation of the game filled him with exhilaration, and he could hardly wait to see how it all unfolded. Yet, he couldn't shake the question of why he had been chosen for this role. Surely, Nezu wouldn't make a mistake like this. But then again, it was Nezu. Nezu wanted the event to be entertaining, so he had chosen someone unexpected. Something had gone wrong, but what could it be? Ochako asked Deku what he had. He responded affirmatively, identifying himself as a hero. Ochako declared herself a hero too, and Ida suggested that they should form a team since they were all heroes. Todoroki confirmed his status as a hero as well, and Tsuyu chimed in, expressing confidence in their potential as a team. Deku noticed that Todoroki sounded disappointed about being a hero, prompting a curious inquiry. Todoroki revealed that he had wished to confront his father. Ida reminded them that killing was not a heroic act. Ochako reassured Deku, stating that they would protect him as a team, which brought him some relief. He chuckled nervously, feeling a mix of emotions. He recognized his quirkless status but felt a dark thought creeping in, suggesting that danger loomed ahead. Ida emphasized that it was the hero's duty to protect the weaker ones, but Deku retorted, questioning who the real weaker one was, suggesting that knowledge was power. Deku speculated that Nezu might have chosen Bakugo or Shinso instead of him, but he worried that Bakugo could be a liability if he turned villainous. He felt a pressing need to uncover the identity of the villain before it was too late, suspecting Aizawa-sensei might be involved. He resolved to work alone to catch the villain and eliminate the threat, knowing that losing would expose him on live television. Deku approached Aizawa-sensei, asking about his role in the exercise. Aizawa sighed, explaining that it was not a game but a training exercise, recalling a previous incident that had ended poorly. When Deku inquired about what had happened, Aizawa mentioned that it involved fire, which only excited Deku more, thinking it would make the exercise more entertaining. Aizawa expressed concern for Deku's mental state, suggesting he might need a therapist. Deku explained that viewing life as a game helped him cope, and Aizawa found that disturbing. He questioned whether Deku thought he would reveal if he were the villain. Present Mike lightened the mood, encouraging Deku to embrace his role as a hero, which made Deku smile with pride. Aizawa reminded them that there were many heroes involved, making it unlikely that Deku would be a villain. Deku pondered the logistics of the event, wondering how the two villains would find each other among so many participants. Aizawa's momentary look of concern caught Deku's attention, but he quickly masked it. Aizawa clarified that he was simply contemplating how to prevent any issues. Deku laughed, insisting he was only joking. Present Mike teased Aizawa about his reaction, while Aizawa remarked on Deku's potential as a comedian, though he didn't find the jokes particularly funny. The next day, the event would begin in earnest, and Deku felt the pressure mounting. Drones buzzed around, some ignored, while others posed for them. However, Deku viewed them as potential threats, imagining them as bombs ready to detonate. He fantasized about manipulating one of the drones to create chaos without revealing his identity. He knew many heroes would be present, including Endeavor, Hawks, and All Might, and he anticipated that Nezu had orchestrated their participation to heighten the excitement. He contemplated using fake blood for his plans but decided that real blood would suffice. He had a target in mind, All Might, and he was eager to execute his plan. Some classmates invited him to train, but Deku believed that no amount of training could prepare them for what lay ahead. Unlike others, he diligently read the rulebook, discovering various rules and loopholes. He noted that fainting would eliminate a player, but someone could feign sleep to avoid disqualification. Aizawa would have his hands full managing the chaos. As Deku observed the drones hovering closely, he wondered if Nezu knew who the true villain was. He struggled to suppress his frustration as he envisioned the competition ahead. All Might and Bakugo were his primary targets. If he could eliminate them, he would secure his victory. He considered the thrill of drawing the walls with his own blood, seeking excitement in the challenge. Suddenly, an announcement from Nezu echoed, instructing Deku to select an item of his choice for the event. He made his way to the teacher's office, noticing that several teachers were missing, likely participants in the game. Among those present were Hound Dog, Ectoplasm, Recovery Girl, and Nezu himself. The rest of the participants were likely involved in the game and shouldn't hear the conversation. I didn't choose a weapon, but instead, I picked up the rulebook. Nezu asked what my choice was. I replied that my choice was the rulebook. Everyone looked at me as if I were completely crazy. I didn't have a quirk and needed a weapon, yet I chose a book. Nezu inquired why I made that choice. I told him he could ask, but that didn't mean I would answer. If I were to answer, I might as well ask a question in return. He thought for a moment and suggested I ask my question first, and then he would consider answering mine. I asked how he managed to convince a bunch of parents to let their kids participate in a game that resembled a war. Nezu laughed, claiming he achieved his goal and got everything he wanted. Recovery Girl interjected, asking if it involved blackmail. Nezu confirmed that it did. Recovery Girl sighed, and Hound Dog remarked on how Nezu had researched about 80 people to blackmail them. Nezu clarified that he hadn't been able to reach my mother at first, but once he did, she immediately agreed, and he didn't have to do anything further. I noted that Inko was often busy and didn't have much time. Hound Dog then pointed out that I had called my mother by her real name. I explained that it would be silly to call her by her family name since I had it too. Nezu suggested we discuss that topic later and asked again why I chose the book. I explained that the book contained rules that would be very useful, and it was impossible to memorize them all. Therefore, I thought it would be better to carry the book with me. I added that it was thicker than a Bible, and if someone were to attack, I could use it to defend myself. Most people say words don't hurt, but with a book as heavy as a brick, they might change their minds. Recovery Girl exclaimed in disbelief at Nezu's actions, worried it would end in chaos. I sat with Hound Dog, Ectoplasm, and Recovery Girl, watching the drone footage. I thought it would be a good idea to put a hero and a student in the same room for a short while. The room was small, like an elevator, and several students were often with a hero. However, the problem was that I had also put Endeavor in a room with a child for about an hour, after which the doors would open and the game would begin. Recovery Girl expressed her concern about Midoriya being in a room with Endeavor, calling him a ray of sunshine and Endeavor a hot-headed idiot. I was curious to see if Midoriya would still smile. Hound Dog asked what Endeavor had done to deserve that. I explained that Endeavor had piqued my interest. I wanted to see if Midoriya could show any emotion other than a smile, wondering if it was due to good self-control or if he simply couldn't help it. As we all focused on the screen, Endeavor and Midoriya were in the room together. Endeavor acknowledged Midoriya as his son's friend, while Midoriya recognized Endeavor as the father of his friend. Endeavor made a comment about Midoriya's appearance, to which Midoriya retorted about his own mother liking his face and suggested that even Endeavor's mother couldn't love him with his looks. He speculated that Endeavor's son avoided using his fire abilities to escape comparisons to him. Endeavor expressed pride that his son had used his powers against Midoriya. Midoriya questioned how Endeavor had failed to convince his son to use his fire abilities for years, while he had managed to do so in just a few minutes. He pointed out that Endeavor wanted his son to be a hero like him, but Midoriya argued that his son despised Endeavor and wanted nothing more than to distance himself from him. Endeavor insisted he wanted his son to be better, to which Midoriya suggested that meant he wanted him to be like All Might. Endeavor vehemently denied that. Midoriya pressed on, explaining that if Endeavor wanted his son to be better, then he was essentially asking him to be like the #1 hero. Recovery Girl noted the unexpected turn of the conversation. Midoriya then realized why Todoroki admired All Might so much. Endeavor commented on his son's poor taste, and Midoriya suggested it was likely due to his forced marriage. I found the conversation increasingly engaging, noting that Midoriya seemed well-informed. Endeavor dismissed Midoriya's involvement, but Midoriya countered, suggesting that what mattered was inside a person. He implied that Endeavor lacked any intelligence, and if he had a brain cell, it had likely been burned away. It was clear that Midoriya was playing with fire, and I found it strange to see such a transformation in his behavior. Endeavor threatened to retaliate, but Midoriya challenged him to say it out loud for the cameras, provoking him further. Recovery Girl urged me to open the doors before Endeavor could act on his threats. I pressed a button, and all the rooms popped open, realizing it might not have been my best idea. Meanwhile, Dabi watched on TV as his father faced off against a child, feeling a sense of admiration for the kid who had bravely challenged Endeavor. This TV show is going to be interesting. Eraserhead reflected on how they should have been in their rooms much longer than they were, though he wasn't complaining. Being away from the children was a relief, yet he was surprised by how things had unfolded. It seemed that unexpected events had spiraled out of control, leaving everyone else equally astonished. Hawks, who had been with Endeavor, seemed to have a lot to say. Eraserhead wondered if Endeavor had caused any problems, perhaps even attacking the students, which might explain why they had been released early for their safety. He couldn't help but feel sympathy for those unfortunate enough to be locked up with him. Midoriya, the ever-enthusiastic student, was in a state of shock. Eraserhead hoped that the cheerful Midoriya hadn't been put in a situation with Endeavor. Midoriya was known for being the most well-behaved and kind student, and Eraserhead found himself questioning Nezu's judgment. He observed one of Hitoshi's classmates extinguishing the flames on a poor kid's arm. Midoriya expressed his gratitude repeatedly, while Eraserhead inquired about the condition of his arm. Midoriya humorously compared it to Endeavor's son, which prompted a cough from Todoroki, who was nearby. Hawks looked intrigued, as if he wanted to take notes on the situation. Midoriya had told Todoroki that if he ever had a brain cell, it was burned like his son. Hawks was torn between laughter and shock, realizing that Midoriya's perfect student image was quickly fading. Zashi pointed out that it was no wonder Todoroki had reacted so strongly. Todoroki was scrutinizing all the students, and Eraserhead felt a twinge of worry about what theories he might come up with, especially since they were live on TV. He noticed Todoroki's intense gaze on Uraraka and a brown-haired girl from Class 1B, and he braced himself for the worst. If Todoroki started theorizing, Eraserhead didn't want to be the one to rein him in. It might be wise to eliminate Todoroki first, Eraserhead thought. If he got rid of all the teachers and heroes, he would be left with a larger group of students, not just the 20 he found challenging. All Might suggested that today would be more about organization. Eraserhead agreed that a villain was unlikely to show up on the first day. However, Midoriya raised a valid concern about the potential for a real villain to strike during the live show, especially with so many top heroes present. Hawks reacted with alarm, and the students fell silent, while All Might praised Midoriya's insight. Night Eye expressed uncertainty about whether the heroes would be enough to handle any threats. Nezu's voice came through a speaker, reassuring everyone that he had called in heroes from other countries to assist them, including some from Europe. The students considered splitting up, and Midnight instructed everyone to find a dormitory first. Midoriya approached the boy who had saved him and hugged him, despite the boy's apparent discomfort. Midoriya introduced himself, and the boy, Mizuiro, responded politely before Midoriya returned to his class. Hawks asked if Midoriya needed medical treatment, but Midoriya confidently stated he would just bandage his arm. As Midoriya walked away, the students gathered in small groups outside a building that would likely serve as their dormitory. Eraserhead recalled how they had initially been in boxes resembling elevators and how he had ended up there. He had been grading papers before finding himself in a sitting position in the elevator. He had wanted to sleep, and as Midoriya entered, Eraserhead contemplated joining him, though he also considered the possibility of eliminating Midoriya. Just then, a loud boom echoed, causing him to turn quickly, nearly straining his neck. Several students were on the ground, and smoke filled the air. The students murmured that an explosion had originated from Mizuiro, affecting multiple people. Eraserhead checked the pulses of those lying on the ground, relieved to find them all alive. It seemed that the student playing the villain was quite skilled, which likely meant the game would conclude quickly. When no one was watching, Midoriya discreetly took a drone with a camera and modified it to avoid being filmed. After distracting everyone with his fiery hand, he hugged the boy who had saved him, taking the opportunity to eliminate several players by letting the drone explode. The rapid turn of events surprised everyone, and Midoriya had no intention of stopping there. He planned to eliminate Shinso and Mei's class first, followed by Class B, his own class, and a mix of heroes. With all the cameras outside, he had a clear path to navigate. Midoriya examined the surroundings and quickly identified the door mechanisms. He discovered that there were vents in the building, though they were locked from the inside. Undeterred, he found useful items in the bathroom, including snacks and sleeping pills, and he collected a kitchen knife for protection. He climbed through the dusty vent, stashing the sleeping pills, flour, and knife, ensuring they were hidden from view. Time was of the essence, and he was determined to act swiftly. Sleeping pills would attract attention, and people would wonder who was the first to enter. Afterward, I wrapped a bandage around my injured hand. Everyone else went inside, and I spoke with Ida and Tsu. Ida remarked that the villain had acted incredibly fast, leaving them with hardly any chance to react. I expressed my concern, saying it was frightening and that I hoped they could find the villain quickly. It was unsettling to think that any of them could be in danger at any moment. Hawks joined the conversation, reassuring me that they were among the top 5 heroes present, along with many others, and reminded me that it was just a game. I admitted that it felt so real. Intentionally, I made my bandages look messy. I then pretended that my bandage was missing and said I was going to the bathroom to replace it. Hawks offered to help, claiming he knew a bit about bandaging burns, but I declined, wanting to learn how to handle it myself in the future. Ida praised my attitude. In the bathroom, I locked the door, climbed onto the sink, and opened the vent, leaving my shoes behind to avoid leaving footprints. I waited with my items, and as I peered into the vent, I noticed a few people inside the room below. The snack plate was empty, and some were already asleep while others argued about sleeping arrangements. I considered locking the door but realized someone might see me. One by one, they settled down, and soon only two remained in a heated discussion. Eventually, one of them succumbed to sleep and fainted before the other could react. I took a sack of flour and threw it from the vent at the remaining person. The flour served as a smoke screen, obscuring visibility. I had memorized the camera's position, jumped down from the vent, and kicked the camera out of commission before locking the door. As the flour settled, I could see again. I quickly stole some shoes to hide my footprints. While the others lay on the floor, I struck each of them in the neck to ensure they were unconscious. With my knife, I cut the wrists of the unconscious individuals, watching as the red liquid flowed. I felt a thrill as I approached the wall to write a message. I climbed back through the vent, admiring my work, and left my shoes behind to eliminate any trace of my size. In the bathroom, I used toilet paper to clean off the flour and blood, masking the scent with lavender spray before flushing the evidence away. In another room, I found a black pen and sought some tape. In the bathroom, I drew a bug on the tape. I then made my way to the kitchen, tape in hand, and casually searched through the plates, placing the tape down and taking one. Aizawa-sensei questioned my need for a plate, and I quickly fabricated a story about Aoyama needing it as a mirror since there were no others available. Aizawa suggested using the bathroom mirror instead, but I countered that it would be problematic if Aoyama took too long in there. Reluctantly, Aizawa told me to just give Aoyama the plate. I realized I needed to eliminate Aoyama to avoid suspicion. Remembering his severe allergy to flour, I discreetly mixed some into the salt shaker while preparing everything else. I chatted normally with the others, observing Aizawa, who was engrossed with the coffee machine alongside Shinso. Suddenly, a scream pierced the air. Someone must have discovered the scene with the 8 unconscious individuals. It was quite a shock to have so many out of the game already. Everyone rushed to the source of the commotion, but no one dared to enter the room, which looked quite intimidating. Several people scrambled to the front, and upon seeing the scene, they screamed in horror. I feigned innocence, having had nothing to do with it this time. Aizawa looked completely bewildered, having missed his chance for a first kill, while I had already taken down 15 people on my own, which I found quite entertaining. Before anyone could enter, I called out that there was flour all over the floor, leaving prints behind. Sir Night Eye insisted that no one should enter the room due to the traces. I suggested that hawks could fly around without touching the ground and could carry someone in with his feathers. All might praise my idea, but I felt annoyed by the term, my boy. I reminded everyone that we needed to click on our bracelets, and Hawks offered to handle that. Best Jeanist announced that everyone could go eat since it was evening, and he would take care of the situation. It seemed he wanted to prevent anyone else from becoming unconscious. As Bakugo prepared dinner, many of us gathered at the table in anticipation. Bakugo demanded plates, and I realized my plan was compromised. I needed to get some plates, so I decided to stretch and pretend I couldn't reach them, hoping someone else would step in to help. Mike-sensei offered his assistance, and I accepted, knowing I had to stay on my toes. How many plates were needed? On the 9th plate was a bug. The narrator decided on 8. Present Mike was behind, stretching to reach the plates. It was a risky move, he might drop them. The narrator felt a sense of dread as the countdown began. Then, Present Mike let out a loud exclamation as the plates slipped from his grasp, crashing down around them. The sound of shattering porcelain filled the air, and shards scattered everywhere. Present Mike staggered back, trying to steady himself against the table, but instead he hit his head and collapsed to the ground, motionless. The narrator knelt beside him, checking for a pulse and pressing on his wristband, feeling a wave of panic wash over them. Nearby, a couple of pro-heroes who had been investigating another incident reacted with shock. Hawks exclaimed in disbelief, while Ectoplasm stated his purpose for being there. Aizawa, observing the situation, expressed his concern. The narrator felt a flicker of hope upon realizing that Present Mike still had a pulse. Hawks asked what had happened, and Ida questioned why Present Mike had let go of the plates. The narrator explained about the bug, prompting a sigh from Aizawa. Midnight chimed in, suggesting that the bug was merely a painted image on the plate. Curious about the investigation in the other room, the narrator inquired. Hawks reported that the situation was dire, as the villain had used someone else's shoes, belonging to a now-deceased individual. Ectoplasm was gathering everyone, asking if they were coming along. The narrator insisted they were fine and hadn't given up, despite the injuries. Ectoplasm questioned their determination to continue, but the narrator affirmed their resolve. Everyone looked at them incredulously. Hawks offered to assist with the wounds, advising the narrator to stop the bleeding quickly. As Hawks worked to bandage the injuries and help remove the shards, the narrators stitched their own wounds with surprising skill. Hawks complimented their ability, expressing surprise at their resilience without painkillers. The narrator explained their past experiences with bullies and the necessity of learning to endure pain. Suddenly, Aoyama's distress drew attention, as he struggled to breathe. The narrator noted that their plan had worked. Hawks instructed Aoyama to stay put, emphasizing the seriousness of the situation. Switching perspectives to Izuku, he wondered what had transpired. Hawks informed him that Aoyama was out of the game due to an allergy triggered by the villain. Izuku felt a wave of dread, realizing the gravity of their circumstances. Hawks reassured him that pro-heroes were present, but Izuku pointed out that the game was orchestrated by Nezu, which raised further concerns. Hawks suggested carrying Izuku to prevent any complications with his stitches, but Izuku insisted he would be fine and planned to read for the rest of the day, hoping to devise a strategy against their adversaries. He discovered riddles in a book that hinted at a secret armory. With a plan forming in his mind, he intended to sneak out at night. The book contained 1,430 pages, and by deciphering the clues, he calculated that room number 8 might hold the secret. He ventured into the bathroom to search for a key, but after some unsuccessful attempts, he considered using sleeping pills in the toothpaste as a clever distraction. Climbing into the vent, he retrieved the sleeping pills and found a key hidden inside. After securing the key and placing the pills in the toothpaste, he realized his stitches had opened, and blood was seeping. He needed an alibi to avoid suspicion. In the kitchen, he spotted a red feather and devised a plan involving fire to create a diversion. As Hawks approached, he questioned the situation. The narrator explained the urgency of their condition, prompting Miriko to assist. Hawks directed her to fetch a first aid kit while guiding the narrator to a seat. The narrator joked about the blood, and Hawks sighed, expressing admiration for Aizawa's work ethic. Feeling dizzy, the narrator struggled to stay upright, but Hawks quickly supported them. The narrator hadn't realized how much they were bleeding until Hawks reacted in alarm. Midnight, disturbed from her sleep, questioned the commotion, while Hound Dog expressed disbelief at the narrator's calmness amidst the chaos. The narrator acknowledged the need for help, emphasizing the losses they had already endured. Aizawa, waking from his nap, chastised the narrator for being disruptive. The narrator greeted him, playfully questioning the nature of his long rest. Aizawa, unfazed, advised against being a smart aleck, while Hawks reminded everyone to keep the language clean in front of their younger companion. "Are you all right?" The response was a simple affirmation, but the concerned looks from everyone suggested otherwise. Hawks pointed out the obvious, questioning how anyone could believe that someone with blood running down their body and a head that had just smashed against the ground could be fine. He pondered whether a person could sustain such injuries and not be affected. The group fell silent, contemplating the severity of the situation. The protagonist wondered if first aid knowledge was not part of the basic training for heroes. Hawks acknowledged it was, but before he could elaborate, Hound Dog interrupted, asking why he smelled smoke. The protagonist admitted to not extinguishing the fire that had started after burning Hawk's feather. They were all trapped in a kitchen that was currently ablaze. This was the story of how the protagonist accidentally set fire to Kamui Woods, who had just woken up to see what was happening. The fire had escalated far beyond what anyone had anticipated, resembling the burning of real wood. The next day, the UA staff and students were exhausted. They had run out of toothpaste and replaced it, but both heroes and students were visibly drained. Sir Night Eye detected the scent of something burnt, while MD Lady wondered about Kamui Wood's whereabouts. The protagonist revealed that he was the one who had been burned. Fat Gum expressed confusion, and Hawks explained that a series of small accidents had caused a minor fire that ultimately harmed Kamui Woods. The protagonist noted that he had indeed burned like wood, eliciting laughter from Hawks, while Mirko struggled to contain her amusement. Aizawa-sensei, however, did not find it funny, and MD Lady confirmed that Kamui Woods was out of commission, but fortunately, no further harm had been done. Hawks pointed out that the protagonist had hit his head against the ground, causing all his stitches to come undone. This drew the attention of everyone present. The protagonist insisted he wasn't hurt badly and was still in the game. MD Lady inquired about who had been involved in the previous night's events, and Hawks listed himself, Mirko, and pointed at the protagonist. Midnight Sensei added that she and Shota had also been there, while Aizawa-sensei sighed in resignation. Hound Dog chimed in, recalling that it was not a pretty sight. The protagonist noted that Kamui Woods had been present as well, prompting Gran Torino to question what he had against him. The protagonist replied that he had nothing against Kamui Woods but was curious about the door in the kitchen, which had drawn everyone's attention. Todoroki speculated that it might be a storage room filled with food. The protagonist approached the door cautiously and opened it slowly. Hawks urged him to open it faster, expressing excitement about what lay beyond. The protagonist reminded everyone that the game was hosted by Nezu and that they needed to proceed with caution. When the door swung open, it revealed not a torture chamber as one might expect, but a recreation room filled with games and a television. The air felt clear, and a student remarked that it didn't look too bad. As the student ventured down the stairs, the protagonist playfully kicked him on the foot when no one was looking, causing a scream as he tumbled down. The sight of the boy rolling down the stairs drew everyone's attention, and when he finally lay still at the bottom, the protagonist questioned if he was dead. Someone rushed to check his pulse, panting heavily, likely from the excitement. The student confirmed that the boy had fainted. Hawks reacted in disbelief, but Aizawa-sensei shot him a glare, prompting a stammered response. The protagonist noted the tension in the room, feeling the weight of the staff and students' gazes upon him. Suddenly, other students began collapsing behind them, leaving everyone to wonder if it was due to the toothpaste or the protagonist's outburst. The protagonist marveled at the chaos unfolding, noticing Aizawa watching in shock, likely overwhelmed by the rapid turn of events. Shinso questioned what was happening, and the students screamed in confusion. Ectoplasm would have a lot of work ahead of him. Recovery Girl expressed her confusion, and Nezu acknowledged that even with all the cameras, the identity of the culprit remained a mystery. Recovery Girl wondered how someone could commit so many acts without being detected. Nezu pointed out that the only room without cameras was the bathroom, and Lunch Rush firmly stated that it would remain that way, insisting there would be no cameras in there. Half the day passed with the protagonist playing card games with others. Despite the grim circumstances, everyone seemed casual, which the protagonist found understandable given the lack of visible evidence of the tragedies. He pondered whether they could go outside, noting that the rulebook didn't explicitly prohibit leaving the house, and the surrounding forest intrigued him. Hawks was surprised to learn that the protagonist had read the rulebook, while Mirko commented on its daunting size, comparing it to a heavy tome. The protagonist argued that reading the book was nothing compared to writing it, acknowledging the effort Nezu must have put into it. Hawks remarked that Nezu was different, and Sir Night Eye mused that he wouldn't be surprised if Nezu found amusement in writing the rules. The protagonist pressed on, emphasizing the importance of the rules, particularly regarding sleeping and fainting, which were similar enough that someone could pretend to sleep to avoid disqualification. Aizawa-sensei lamented that he needed more than just coffee to survive the day without losing his temper. The protagonist revealed that he had brought the rulebook as his item, prompting Ida to commend him for his dedication to the rules. Hawks noted that the protagonist had managed to bring more than he needed, leading the protagonist to conclude that the rulebook was indeed the most essential item. Hawks mentioned that he needed something, prompting a curious response about whether it was cannibalism. He clarified that as a hawk, he ate other birds. In the midst of the conversation, someone urged Tokoyami to run, and the sight of him fleeing elicited a mix of laughter and concern from the onlookers. Kaken, with a dismissive tone, remarked on the nerdiness of carrying a rule book. The narrator defended the idea of striving for success, pointing out that Kaken himself had a strict schedule and good grades, which could also be seen as nerdy. Kaken threatened Deku, declaring he would kill him, which led to more heroes stepping in to prevent any harm. Best Jeanist inquired if Kaken was always like that, to which the narrator sighed, prompting Ochako to comment that the sigh didn't suit them. The rest of the day was spent playing chess against oneself, resulting in a loss. As night fell, anticipation built. The narrator discovered a room that seemed to be a weapons storage area, hidden behind a shelf in a small library. Sneaking out, they navigated the cameras in the teaching room and found a cabinet filled with non-lethal weapons designed to incapacitate opponents. However, the mystery of a key lingered in their mind. At the end of the corridor, a door led to what appeared to be a cell, a potential hiding place for villains. The narrator considered using it as a makeshift prison and decided to take 2 small weapons that could be easily concealed, while also crafting a unique one. The narrator devised a plan to remove All Might from the game, recalling his discouraging words from a previous encounter on the roof. All Might had told them that becoming a hero was a futile dream, emphasizing the need for public support and the challenges faced by someone quirkless. That day, the narrator sold a signed notebook, shocked by the high price it fetched. They were determined to ensure All Might faced consequences, aiming to have him voted out by his students and colleagues. To execute this plan, the narrator needed 4 people: All Might, Kaken, Monoma, and Itsuka Kendo. Knowing Kaken's routine, they approached his door and knocked. Kaken's annoyed response indicated he wanted to sleep and didn't want to see the narrator. The narrator, frustrated, declared they had no time for pleasantries and warned that they would break down the door if necessary. A nearby camera seemed to falter, suggesting Nezu was losing control. The narrator pushed the door open, allowing the camera to enter and locking it behind them. Kaken questioned the narrator's intentions, who revealed they had a plan to find the culprit behind recent events. Kaken refused to cooperate, claiming it was a waste of time. In response, the narrator pulled out a weapon, emphasizing the seriousness of the situation and the consequences of alerting others. Kaken accused the narrator of being a villain, to which they replied that they were simply determined to achieve their goals. The narrator explained their discovery of a weapons seller and their plan to create a fake map to mislead potential suspects. Kaken wanted to know his role in all of this, and the narrator insisted they needed a witness. They reminded Kaken of their shared past, highlighting their history as rivals and the bond they had formed. Kaken acknowledged their past but argued it should be a reason not to work together. The narrator maintained a positive outlook, asserting they knew Kaken better than anyone else. Kaken questioned the narrator's ability to get along with everyone, to which the narrator clarified that while they could get along, trust was a different matter. They needed leverage against someone to ensure cooperation. Trust is a good thing, but control is more. Kaken called Izuku a control freak, and Izuku couldn't help but laugh. It was amusing that Kaken had only just realized it. Izuku reminded him of the words that had led him to despise friendship and trust. He recalled how Kaken had once suggested that if he wanted to be a hero so badly, there was a solution. Kaken sighed, acknowledging that he was working with Izuku now. Izuku felt pleased by this development and pointed at the camera, suggesting that Kaken would want people to see their cooperation on television. Izuku hid the map and planned to tell Monoma and Kendo that he had hidden it elsewhere. Kaken questioned why Izuku chose to work with those he considered extras, calling them idiots. Izuku shot back, reminding Kaken that he was in a precarious situation, holding a gun and ready to use it if necessary. He expressed his disdain for the idea of both of them getting kicked out of the game. Kaken urged Izuku to get himself together, offering to be his witness. Izuku corrected him, stating that his name was either Izuku or Midoriya, and warned Kaken that he could ensure he wouldn't find another job for the rest of his life if he wanted to keep their past a secret. Kaken dismissed it as just a game, questioning why Izuku was taking it so seriously. Izuku reminded him of a past incident that had hurt him deeply. Meanwhile, the drone with the camera was losing control. Kaken repeated his encouragement for Izuku to get it together, affirming his willingness to be a witness. Izuku felt relieved and thanked him, glad they could cooperate. He then headed to inform the others. In the hallway, Izuku encountered Kendo and Monoma, surprised by his luck that they were alone. Monoma mocked him, pointing out that he was one of the quirkless students. Izuku felt a surge of anger and spat back, surprising them both. Monoma boasted that if he were the villain, Izuku's class would be the first to fall. In a swift motion, Izuku grabbed Monoma and held a gun towards Kendo while keeping a grip on Monoma's neck. He declared that if he were truly a villain, he would have taken them out on the first day, but since it was already the third day, it was clear he wasn't the villain, he just didn't like them. He ordered them to follow him to a dorm if they wanted to avoid a grim fate. Once inside the dorm, Izuku instructed them to lock the door and move away from it. He could see Kendo clearly and noted that the camera was now positioned behind him. Monoma questioned Izuku's intentions, asking why he wouldn't just kill them like the others. Izuku explained that if he killed them, he would be out of the game, and he needed their cooperation for a plan he had in mind. Monoma scoffed at the idea of cooperating under threat, but Izuku pointed out that it had worked for Kaken. He revealed that he had access to a weapons cellar and offered to share the location of the map with them. Kendo asked why he wanted to do that, and Izuku explained that he wanted to protect his classmates and needed their help in case something happened to him. Monoma remained defiant, insisting they wouldn't work with Izuku. Izuku clarified that they wouldn't be working with him, they would be working for him. He left the decision up to them, making it clear that it was their choice whether they wanted to live or not. Kendo eventually agreed to a deal, and Izuku whispered the hiding place to Monoma and Kendo. Monoma reacted with disbelief, claiming it was a stupid hiding place that everyone would find. Izuku then warned Kendo to keep his dog away from him to avoid any accidents. Nezu observed the situation with a cup of tea in hand, surprised by Izuku's extraordinary methods. Recovery Girl cautioned him against underestimating the situation, knowing him too well. Ectoplasm expressed disbelief that this was the same boy who always wore a happy smile. Izuku had learned to manipulate others due to his quirklessness, needing to act in various ways to avoid being despised. He reflected on the rumors that quirklessness was contagious and considered whether he should send Izuku to therapy, questioning if the hero course was right for him. Recovery Girl noted that Izuku had a big smile, and Nezu acknowledged his familiarity with manipulation, recognizing the techniques Izuku used to win people over. Present Mike remarked that he didn't think Izuku had drawn the bug on him, recalling how close he had been when he got the plates. He probably didn't realize it, otherwise, he would have taken action, jumped out of the way, or something similar. Ectoplasm noted that after what happened with Aoyama, he believed the individual wanted to protect his class, which is why he took action. Izuku was sneaking around quietly in the middle of the night. He checked on Kaken and Kendo with her dog, and now all that was left was All Might. Slowly, he crept into the room where All Might was staying, sharing the dorm with a few others, including Vlad King and Aizawa. He approached All Might's bed, where he was in his skeleton form. Izuku took a deep breath, holding his gun close while keeping his aura well hidden. He thought he might have startled All Might quite a bit. It wasn't a pleasant sight to wake up and realize someone was pointing a gun at him. Izuku noted that All Might was now awake. All Might seemed confused, asking who Izuku was. Izuku introduced himself as Midoriya and clarified that he was not a villain. He explained that he would never harm his own class, especially not by poisoning Aoyama with flour. His class was very important to him, and he wanted to do everything he could to protect them, even if it meant holding a gun to All Might's head to ensure cooperation. All Might wanted to know what Izuku wanted. Izuku, feeling a bit pleased with All Might's cooperation, explained that he needed a convincing witness since he was quirkless. He had informed Kendo, Kaken, and Monoma about a hiding place for a map that supposedly led to an armory. All three were suspects based on various observations. When All Might inquired about the facts, Izuku quickly fabricated a story, mentioning that the explosion at the end could have come from Kaken or someone who copied his quirk. He explained that Kaken produced nitroglycerin through his sweat, which could lead to an explosion without coming from his body, similar to Monoma's abilities. Izuku had placed 3 fake cards in 3 hiding spots, telling everyone that the right card was hidden somewhere. If the card glued under the table disappeared, it would indicate Kaken's involvement. If the card sewn into his mattress vanished, it would point to Kendo, and if the card buried next to a small tree with red leaves was gone, it would implicate Monoma. All Might questioned why Izuku was sharing this information. Izuku explained that a person with a quirk was much more believable than someone without one. Now, Izuku had manipulated all 4 individuals, or rather he had deceived them into believing a lie. He had certain plans in mind for early the next morning before everything unfolded. He intended to eliminate the first and second targets quickly. He knew that Todoroki had trouble sleeping and often woke up early, usually wanting a glass of water. Sometimes he would sit quietly, and on rare occasions he would ask for juice, but he never requested tea. Izuku got up early and headed to the kitchen, having not slept much after his conversation with All Might. He had quickly returned to bed and waited for Todoroki to wake up. It was kind of Todoroki to tuck them all in properly, as they shared a room with Ida. After about 10 minutes in bed, Izuku finally made his way to the kitchen. He greeted Todoroki, who admitted he couldn't sleep either. Todoroki asked why Izuku was awake, noting that he had been up about 15 minutes ago. Izuku explained that he couldn't sleep because of the events that had transpired, and he noticed a look of relief on Todoroki's face. Izuku decided to bring up his injured arm, which had been burned. He mentioned that many things had happened, and his arm had really hurt. During the night, Todoroki expressed his regret about what his father had done and offered to take a look at the injury, as he knew a lot about burns. Izuku showed Todoroki the burn, recalling that he had learned about burns from Katsuki. Todoroki examined it and advised that it didn't look good, emphasizing the need to pay close attention to the wound to prevent infection. Izuku thanked him and expressed his disbelief that Todoroki's father would attempt to harm someone on camera. He speculated that Todoroki's father could be the villain, but at the same time, he wondered if it was merely an act of anger, which was foolish given how quickly he revealed his identity. Todoroki acknowledged that his father was a villain both in real life and in the game. Izuku pointed out that no one would believe them if they spoke out, as he was the number 2 hero. Todoroki agreed, stating they needed to catch him in the act. He revealed that he had already devised a plan. Izuku found it easier than expected to align with Todoroki's thoughts, as he had already suspected his father was the villain and had included Izuku in his plans. Todoroki explained his strategy, and Izuku listened carefully, looking for weaknesses in the plan. He subtly tried to make Todoroki's own plan sound flawed without directly criticizing it. Todoroki realized that the plan could backfire, agreeing with Izuku's assessment. Izuku then suggested a plan where he would sacrifice himself to throw Todoroki's father off the trail. Todoroki was shocked, silently exclaiming in disbelief. Izuku explained that in the game, there were multiple heroes and only 2 villains, so eliminating one villain could justify his own sacrifice. Todoroki asked what Izuku intended to do. Izuku clarified that as a hero, it was forbidden to kill others, even villains. He would be eliminated after taking down Todoroki's father. Todoroki questioned whether Izuku truly believed that was a good plan. Izuku insisted he would do anything to protect his class, emphasizing how much they meant to him and how far he would go to ensure their safety. Todoroki pointed out that Izuku was quirkless and that such a plan wouldn't work. Izuku reminded himself to stay calm, realizing that no one else would confront Endeavor except Todoroki. Todoroki then asked if Izuku intended to shoot him. The question seemed oddly positive to Izuku. He simply nodded in response. The gun can only eliminate players in the game. Everyone wears bracelets that allow them to exit the game if they are too injured or to let others exit on their behalf if they are unconscious. The gun can deliver an electric shock that knocks players out. Todoroki expressed his willingness to help, but the narrator insisted that it wasn't necessary and that they could handle it themselves. They were determined to protect their classmates and didn't want anyone else to be eliminated. Todoroki acknowledged their desperation and shared his own reluctance to participate in the game, emphasizing that he didn't want to see anyone else kicked out while villains threatened them all. The narrator thanked Todoroki and promised to give everything for their class, feeling a surge of gratitude. In an unexpected moment, Todoroki's left side ignited with flames, causing the narrator to feel the sting of heat once again. As noon approached, the narrator discreetly made their way to a tree with red leaves, carefully digging out a map. They left a noticeable hole and a pile of dirt behind before returning to a chessboard to continue playing against themselves, only to lose yet again. Perhaps this was their hidden talent. Later that evening, All Might called a meeting, likely having noticed the hole. He shared that he had an idea about the identity of the villain and that he and another student had devised a plan to trap the culprit. The narrator felt a pang of frustration, wishing to be acknowledged for their contributions instead of being overlooked. Sir Night Eye interjected, reminding All Might that his plans often went awry. All Might, undeterred, explained that the student he worked with had discovered a weapons cellar. Aizawa-sensei expressed disbelief, but All Might insisted that the game was crafted by a malevolent force. All Might elaborated on the plan. The student had created 3 fake maps and distributed them to 3 different students, each leading to a different location. This way, if a map went missing, they would know who had taken it. Sir Night Eye questioned whether the plan was truly All Might's. Aizawa-sensei noted that one of the cards mentioned in the meeting had vanished. All Might confirmed that if the card glued under the table was missing, it pointed to Bakugo. If the card sewn into a mattress was gone, it indicated Kendo, and if the card buried underground had disappeared, it implicated Monoma. Upon checking, it was revealed that the card buried under the tree with red leaves was missing, leading to accusations against Monoma. Monoma protested, claiming it was a lie, while Bakugo dismissed the accusations as nonsense. Kendo echoed the confusion, but the narrator clarified that they had made 6 cards and had told Bakugo about the lamp, while the other 2 cards were indeed in the flower pot and the Wizard of Oz book. They explained that they had misled the others about the card locations, and unless Monoma had been digging around, he was the only one who could have known where the cards were hidden. Bakugo remained silent, and the narrator noticed Aizawa-sensei's confusion, likely realizing that there were 2 killers, one a hero and the other a student. The narrator felt a sense of satisfaction, knowing that All Might's own students and colleagues would vote him out instead of supporting him, especially with Bakugo as his successor. After the vote, it was revealed that both All Might and Endeavor were out of the game, having failed to attend the meeting. In the aftermath, All Might was voted out without defending himself, and Nezu later informed everyone that he was innocent. The narrator was taken aback, questioning how this could be. Sir Night Eye asked if anyone else knew about the plan, to which the narrator replied that someone must have been eavesdropping despite their late-night visit. Aizawa-sensei probed further, and Bakugo sarcastically questioned if the narrator had held a gun to All Might's head. The narrator confirmed that they had wanted him to cooperate, prompting Midnight Sensei to express shock. Hawks chimed in, arguing that there was no justification for such actions. The narrator explained that they had never found the weapons cellar and that the weapon was a fake, constructed later. Mariko inquired about the gun's fate, and the narrator admitted to giving it to Todoroki, who had requested it. Tsu questioned the wisdom of handing it over so easily, while Ida cautioned that it wasn't heroic behavior. Hawks nervously asked if Todoroki would actually resort to violence, but the narrator reassured everyone that they didn't believe Todoroki would go that far. Aizawa-sensei then wondered about Todoroki's whereabouts, and Hawks expressed concern. Do you really think he shot his own father? Tsu believed so, and Uraraka definitely agreed. Ida was certain of it too. Hound Dog needed at least one student who wouldn't require therapy after this war game. The narrator insisted they were fine, but Aizawa-sensei remarked that they needed as much therapy as he needed coffee. The narrator suggested that if Aizawa would sleep, he wouldn't need coffee. Ida pointed out that they should look for Todoroki, and Hawks proposed they split up, using his feathers to search as well. As everyone searched, many suspected that Shoto was genuinely trying to shoot Endeavor. The lack of trust was palpable, and it seemed obvious that he had already shot him. At some point, the narrator heard a student scream that they had found someone, but their focus was elsewhere. They looked down at the ground, realizing they would need to take someone out of the game soon. On the ground lay the first victim of Aizawa-sensei, Wash, who was motionless, likely attacked from behind while walking around at night. The faint smell of coffee lingered in the air, and the narrator noticed a black hair nearby, feeling disappointed in Aizawa-sensei for being so careless. They picked up the hair and opened the wounds to intensify the scent of blood. The narrator announced they had found someone else, and midnight arrived, expressing her frustration about the situation. The narrator tried to maintain a positive outlook, despite the grim circumstances. Midnight questioned the smell of blood, to which the narrator explained their stitches had come undone. Midnight was baffled by how the narrator handled their injuries so casually. The narrator admitted to being reckless and having built a high pain tolerance over time due to frequent accidents. They rushed to where Endeavor lay on his stomach, and Shoto was motionless on his knees. The narrator gasped, realizing another murder had occurred. Aizawa-sensei asked how many had happened, to which the narrator replied it was just one person. After another sleepless night spent staring at the wall or reading, Izuku felt exhausted. He had experienced this before and could go many days without crashing. He stared at the chessboard in a daze, moving pieces occasionally. His thoughts were not about the game but rather about how to eliminate everyone. As he moved the pieces repeatedly, he recognized which plans would lead to victory and which would cost too much. The plan involving the gun hadn't been wise, and he was no longer seen as an underrated player since 3 people had been eliminated due to circumstances beyond their control. He had built a weapon and given it to Todoroki, who had used it against another player. While he hadn't directly killed anyone, he played a role in their elimination and had threatened 3 others. Realizing his last move was a mistake that could reveal his identity, he rested his head on the table, feeling defeated. Aizawa-sensei commented that sign didn't suit him. Alone in the room with Aizawa, surrounded by cameras, the narrator felt foolish for not recognizing the situation. The cameras typically followed those expected to take action. The narrator expressed their frustration over their losses, and Aizawa-sensei asked if they were playing against themselves. The narrator acknowledged this, and Aizawa noted that it meant they could win and lose simultaneously. The narrator sighed again, feeling the tension rise as Aizawa moved closer, wondering if he intended to confront them. The narrator resolved to stop him without revealing their knowledge of his identity as the killer. Feeling that Aizawa underestimated them, the narrator attempted to distract him by discussing the rarity of quirkless individuals in Japan. They explained how many quirkless people faced dire circumstances, often abandoned or overlooked by society. Aizawa listened intently as the narrator elaborated on the harsh realities faced by quirkless individuals, including the stigma and lack of medical support. Aizawa expressed concern over the situation, but the narrator revealed they had grown accustomed to it. Aizawa insisted they shouldn't accept such a reality, but the narrator had already resigned themselves to it, finding a strange sense of humor in the unfairness of life. "What do I have left?" Izuku giggled, always wearing a happy expression. Some time had passed, and he was still playing against himself until Grand Tornado arrived. He sat down opposite Izuku and asked what color he wanted. Izuku chose black, which surprised Grand Tornado, as most people preferred white. They set up the pieces, and Grand Tornado made the first move. Izuku followed, quickly realizing that Grand Tornado was playing rather recklessly, though not poorly. Izuku played cautiously, keeping his strategy hidden. After a few moves, he made 2 reckless moves and lost. Grand Tornado declared checkmate. Izuku understood that it wasn't wise to steal 2 cards for Aizawa and himself while pretending to be heroes. He expressed disappointment and requested another turn, which Grand Tornado agreed to. The same scenario unfolded again. Grand Tornado played recklessly, and Izuku played safely. He sacrificed his black queen and made a single reckless move with the new space to play. Once again, Grand Tornado announced checkmate. Izuku realized it wasn't a good idea to get rid of Aizawa and then steal a card for himself. He asked for another turn, but Grand Tornado warned him it was a waste of time, stating he needed a challenge. Izuku claimed he played better under pressure, and Grand Tornado smiled, stating that whoever lost next would be out of the game. Izuku asked if that meant out of the real game or just the chess game. Grand Tornado clarified it was the real one, which added pressure. Izuku accepted the challenge, not wanting to pass up the opportunity. They resumed playing, with Grand Tornado's reckless moves and Izuku's careful strategy. He sacrificed his queen again but refused to take risks. His focus was unwavering, keeping his king distant from the white pieces. Piece by piece, he captured Grand Tornado's pieces with each reckless move until he reached the king and knocked him over with a pawn. Grand Tornado had played recklessly, and now Izuku had his plan set. A smile crept across his lips, and he reveled in his success. Grand Tornado expressed disbelief, claiming Izuku had no chance. Izuku reminded him that a deal was a deal and prepared to play with the White King in hand. Grand Tornado noted that Izuku had been toying with him the entire time, not using all his skills, just having fun. Izuku asked if Grand Tornado played with the other participants the same way, hinting at his true nature. With an innocent expression, Izuku tilted his head like a puppy, but his face quickly morphed into a wicked smile. He leaned forward, looking deeply into Grand Tornado's eyes. He explained that everyone was a piece in his well-thought-out plan to eliminate those who were not important, ensuring victory. He never claimed that he meant to include everyone except the two villains, and he pointed out that Grand Tornado was not part of his plan. Grand Tornado agreed to stick to the deal, sitting down and pressing a button on his bracelet before closing his eyes. Izuku realized Grand Tornado had taken himself out of the game. The others reacted with shock and confusion, questioning why he would do such a thing. Izuku explained that Grand Tornado wanted to make a bet, and he had thought it was a joke. Aizawa reminded him that Grand Tornado never joked about bets. Izuku felt responsible for 4 players leaving the game, but the others reassured him it wasn't his fault. As the tension lingered, Izuku felt a tremor in his lower lip and tears welling in his eyes, knowing he was an excellent actor. It was a deep, black night. Izuku questioned the need for sleep, realizing that he would only faint and hallucinate, waking up with amnesia. Instead of wasting time, he decided to wander through the darkness. Stealing a card that identified him as a hero was too risky, as someone would notice. Instead, he planned to kidnap a hero with the card in the weapons room, where there should be enough space. The safest option would be to target Hagakure, as she was nearly quirkless with her bracelet that couldn't be removed. However, she was in a room full of girls, and Izuku didn't want to risk being caught there, fearing they'd think he was a pervert. Shinso would also be too dangerous, as he could unintentionally answer one of his questions. He had seen quirk-canceling cuffs in the weapons room, but he wasn't sure if they would work on Shinso's mental quirk. Ultimately, it didn't matter who he kidnapped, as long as he could put the cuffs on them. Izuku stealthily moved through the area, deciding on Kirishima as his target. Kirishima could cause problems for him, and he wasn't someone Izuku wanted to manipulate. Slowly he opened the door, which creaked softly. He regretted not using the vent, but it was too late now. Suddenly, a dark thought crossed his mind. Could he eliminate them one by one while they slept? He approached the boys in the dorm, contemplating pressing the button on their bracelets to incapacitate them. He would spare Kirishima and Kaminari, but he had no idea how the mechanism worked. If it was an electric shock, it wouldn't be good for Kaminari. He would probably wake up and I would be in trouble. If everyone was unresponsive and Kirishima was missing, all the blame would fall on Kaminari, and then on Kirishima. It was that simple. Kirishima was not someone I hated. He often talked about how much he trained to be a hero and his desire to succeed, but his quirk was too weak. You don't tell someone who likely had to train 3 times harder because they lacked a quirk that they wouldn't understand the effort it took. I placed the cuffs on his hands and stood up, lifting him. He felt as heavy as a rock. On my way to the armory, I encountered no trouble, which was quite fortunate given my usual luck. I tossed him into the second room, likely waking him in the process, and immediately locked the door. There was a button that allowed my voice to be heard from the soundproof room. Kirishima called out, asking to be let out, insisting it wasn't manly at all. I replied that perhaps being the villain wasn't manly either. Lowering my voice, I thought about the risk of him discovering my identity. He asked where he was and who I was, and I reminded him that I was the villain, as if I hadn't mentioned it before. I continued, explaining that he couldn't use his quirk for a reason, and that the cuffs on his hands were part of it. I warned him not to press the button on his bracelet, as it would paralyze him. I didn't want him to be in a situation where he couldn't move or eat. Kirishima protested, saying I didn't have to take it that far, that it was just a game. I agreed, noting that I was playing my part and that he was going on a strict pizza diet. He was confused, asking why a pizza diet. I explained that the gap under the door was too small for anything other than a flat pizza. I admitted I still hadn't figured out how to give him water, but reassured him not to worry. In another scene, Izuku reflected on the beautiful day, thinking it was the perfect time for a powerful scream that would wake everyone up. He remembered he shared a dorm and asked Ida if he thought something had happened, fearing it might be a new victim. He hoped it would only be one person, as the game was becoming increasingly deadly, and he was scared of what could happen to their classmates. Ida, determined, insisted they wouldn't let anything happen. He opened the door dramatically, revealing Kaminari in a panic, claiming someone was missing and that others were unresponsive. Izuku tried to reassure him, saying whatever he was looking for would reappear soon. Kaminari insisted it was a person, Kirishima, who had disappeared. Izuku assured him that their classmates were likely just fast asleep. Kaminari, in distress, claimed they were dead. As his quirk began to activate, Ida warned Izuku to move away. Kaminari was having a panic attack, and as others stepped back, Izuku approached him, placing a hand on his shoulder and promising they would find Kirishima and that he would be okay. He urged Kaminari to be strong and assured him nothing would happen to Kirishima. Kaminari expressed his fear of the villain, and Izuku acknowledged the danger but reassured him that Kirishima would return with only a few scratches. He reminded Kaminari to calm down and breathe deeply, hoping the electricity would subside. As the tension eased, Izuku felt relief wash over him. Fat Gum approached, placing a hand on their shoulders, and Izuku noted it wasn't his fault that Fat Gum didn't understand how electricity worked. Midnight rushed over, confused about what had happened. Izuku warned her that touching Kaminari would have dire consequences, comparing it to poking a fork into a socket. Midnight quickly withdrew her hand. Aizawa-sensei inquired why Izuku hadn't fallen to the ground. Izuku explained that he had built up an immunity to electricity, and regrettably, he had unintentionally harmed 5 people. Miriko expressed disbelief that someone could unintentionally cause such harm without a quirk. Ectoplasm arrived to collect the unresponsive individuals, and Izuku noted they had a collection of them now. He realized what he had feared had come true. Kaminari was out of commission, but Izuku felt it was for the best, as he wouldn't have to hurt him unnecessarily. He saved the best for last, knowing Kaminari had fought back, using his electricity on someone else, but thankfully not on Bakugo, whom Izuku wanted to confront himself. Despite his efforts to defend Kaminari's innocence, few were convinced. Later, they heard Nezu announce that Kaminari was indeed innocent. Izuku exchanged glances with everyone, and Aizawa-sensei acknowledged their understanding without needing to say it. Hawks remarked that it probably wasn't a good idea to suspect Kaminari. Izuku questioned why they thought Kaminari had the capability to pull off such a scheme, reminding them that most of his class knew him well and likely supported him. He turned to Aizawa-sensei, wondering why he would choose Kaminari, as a teacher should know what his students were capable of. Chapter end. Izuku found himself in the midst of chaos, reveling in the mess he had created. For 2 whole days, he had orchestrated pranks and stirred up trouble, all while ensuring that suspicion fell elsewhere. His goal was not merely to ignite a conflict between heroes and villains. He wanted to incite a rivalry among the heroes themselves. He spread rumors, dyed things in unexpected colors, swapped sugar with salt, and drew bugs on the walls. His elaborate plans had succeeded in deepening the animosity between Class 1A and Class 1B. Fights broke out frequently, with students clashing while others attempted to intervene. The atmosphere was charged with shouting and brawling, and Izuku had turned his classmates into rivals more than ever before. Monoma shouted about the supposed weakness of Class 1A, while Kaken retaliated with insults, dismissing their worth. The tension escalated, and Izuku felt the weight of the conflict around him. He tried to calm Kaken down, but his friend only grew more agitated, hurling a book that struck the wall and left a crack. The sight shocked some students, but Kaken remained oblivious to the chaos he was causing. Monoma taunted Kaken further, questioning his strength and bringing up the absence of his friends. Kaken vehemently denied any connection to them, while others, like Mina and Hawks, attempted to defuse the situation. Aizawa-sensei, seemingly unfazed, sipped his coffee and observed the turmoil. As the situation spiraled into a physical confrontation, Izuku had hoped for a milder outcome. He had underestimated the power of his manipulation. Fists flew, and even Ida, who tried to mediate, found himself caught in the fray. Midnight was about to intervene with her mist, but Izuku warned her that it would only worsen the situation. Aizawa-sensei expressed his disappointment at the unfolding chaos. Izuku felt utterly exhausted, wishing for a moment of peace. He longed to lie down and sleep, but the noise and conflict made that impossible. Aizawa-sensei acknowledged that he was not alone in his fatigue. The chaos continued, with Monoma declaring that Class 1B would leave the hero agency. Hawks questioned this decision, but Monoma insisted they were tired of being pushed around. Vlad King raised concerns about the rules, prompting Monoma to turn to Izuku for clarification. Faced with the dilemma of supporting or opposing Monoma, Izuku chose to mislead them, claiming there was a rule against leaving. Monoma seized on this, believing they could depart, while Izuku felt a mix of triumph and dread at the unfolding events. Afterward, armed with various tools, Izuku pursued Class 1B, determined to bring them back together. He searched for them, feeling a sense of urgency. It was perplexing that such a large group could vanish so quickly. Calling out into the silence, he felt the weight of the situation. Cameras followed him, and he smiled before smashing one, ensuring no one would witness his shift in demeanor. He concealed a kitchen knife behind his back as he navigated the area, trying to sense any presence. Monoma's voice broke through the quiet, expressing frustration about the cameras. Izuku informed him that one remained, and he quickly took it down. As he confronted Monoma, he urged the need for unity against the villains, emphasizing that division would only make them more vulnerable. They needed to work together, and Izuku was determined not to let the opportunity slip away. Chapter End. They needed each other just as much as they needed to work together. Monoma questioned the source of that sentiment, dismissing it as something from a cheesy book about collaboration and friendship. Koda expressed concern about their recent decision to flee, noting that their previous location was like a sinking ship, dead and dangerous. They were not entirely safe, but they were safer where they were now. Koda posed a choice: either join them and prove they weren't the villain or return to the sinking ship. Monoma reassured them that at least none of the villains disguised as heroes were with them. One of them decided to join, feeling a sense of impending regret about the decision. Monoma was about to say something when a gas bomb was thrown into their midst. It soared high before landing in the center of the group. In a flash, the individual moved swiftly among their classmates, striking pressure points or delivering quick punches, creating confusion and panic. Some students began to hyperventilate due to their quirks. The gas began to dissipate, revealing a few students still on their feet, running in disarray. A silhouette appeared, and the individual threw another gas bomb into the air, watching as the fog cleared. They called out for Koda, who responded, and they found each other amidst the thick fog. Just as the bomb dropped, the individual jumped back, narrowly avoiding the blast that sent Koda reeling. New gas filled the air, and they shouted out to check on their classmates, urging them to respond. One student confirmed their presence, but the individual, now adopting a different tone, threatened another, suggesting they might be next. The tension escalated as they lunged at the nearest student, attacking with a knife. The fog cleared, revealing motionless bodies on the ground, and the individual stood over one of them, knife in hand, realizing the implications of their actions. To avoid suspicion, they stabbed their own leg, ensuring there was enough blood to mislead anyone who might question them. They moved among the fallen, inflicting more wounds, feeling a strange satisfaction in the chaos. Afterward, they discarded weapons, washing them in blood to eliminate any traces of their involvement. As they approached the door, they gasped for breath, realizing the gravity of their injuries. They knocked frantically, calling for help. When the door swung open, Night Eye was taken aback, while Hawks reacted in shock. Midnight rushed to check on them, and they dropped to their knees, trying to hide their confusion. They feigned calmness, insisting they were fine despite the blood covering them. Aizawa demanded to know what had happened, urging them to stand. They described the scene of chaos, how everyone had been alive until the fog appeared, leading to screams and bloodshed. Their breathing grew erratic, and they collapsed, overwhelmed by the memories. Hawks urged them to breathe, reminding them it was just a game. Their body trembled, and they struggled to maintain composure as Aizawa called out to them. They managed to respond, but a coughing fit overtook them, and Midnight rubbed their back as they accepted a glass of water from Ida. The situation was dire, and they felt the weight of their actions. Mirko questioned how they could downplay their injuries, but they insisted that others were still in danger. Aizawa reassured them that help would come, but the individual was haunted by the destruction of the cameras, realizing that their classmates had not wanted to be observed. They stood, knowing they shouldn't remove the knife from their leg, but the game demanded they act. Ochako wondered what was going on. The narrator expressed a determination to stay in the game, refusing to step outside just to tend to a wound. Hawks reacted with disbelief, while the narrator insisted that as long as they remained conscious, they would not leave the game. Aizawa-sensei sighed, and Midnight-sensei voiced concern for Midoriya. The narrator reiterated that there was no rule preventing them from continuing, stating they would only stop if they were incapacitated. They regretted their words, sensing Aizawa-sensei's strange gaze and fearing potential repercussions. The narrator requested another glass of water from Ida, who was eager to help, but Tsu offered to do it instead. The narrator closed their eyes, attempting to calm down and breathe normally, realizing they might have overdramatized the situation. In Izuku's perspective, he devised another one of his questionable plans. Despite the absurdity of some ideas, they all contributed to a larger strategy, akin to a chess game where victory required multiple moves. His current task involved dragging a washing machine around, which he found unexpectedly heavy. The late hour added to the absurdity of his actions, and he pondered how to explain himself if caught. He imagined justifying his unusual behavior by claiming he wanted to mimic a snail, using a washing machine as a shell. Fortunately, there was a laundry room with several machines, allowing him to create chaos. His plan involved using the washing machines in a way that would lead to a significant disruption. He contemplated the implications of his actions, realizing he was about to create something explosive. Aizawa-sensei appeared, questioning the narrator's actions with the washing machine. The narrator, startled, turned the question back on Aizawa-sensei, noting the oddity of his presence at night. The door to his dorm was closed, and he felt a surge of relief that he wasn't inside. He asked Aizawa-sensei what he was doing there, and Aizawa-sensei pointed out that he had asked first. The narrator admitted to being uncertain about his own actions. Aizawa-sensei remarked on the absurdity of dragging a washing machine around without a clear purpose. The narrator, feeling defensive, mentioned having a weapon, implying he wouldn't hesitate to use it. Aizawa-sensei expressed disbelief, and the narrator explained that he considered a rule book a serious self-defense tool. Aizawa-sensei noted that while knowledge is power, it didn't clarify the washing machine's role. The narrator explained that he had picked up the book as a weapon, and Aizawa-sensei seemed unfazed by the bizarre situation. The narrator insisted that Aizawa-sensei should stop questioning him and his washing machine, revealing he had named it Gunter. Aizawa-sensei sighed and agreed to let the matter go. They parted ways, and the narrator proceeded to drag 5 washing machines into an unused dorm, preparing for his chaotic plan. He gathered supplies, including lavender-scented soap and toilet cleaner, which contained nitric acid. Combining these ingredients would result in nitroglycerin, a highly explosive substance. The narrator envisioned the chaos that 5 washing machines filled with nitroglycerin would create, likening them to 5 bombs. He worked on creating a trigger mechanism that would set off the explosion when activated. After locking the room, he stealthily moved through the area, only to stumble upon Shishido, the 13th hero, lying on the floor. He chose to ignore it and continued to his own dorm, where he found Ida in a similar state. The narrator felt a twinge of regret but pushed it aside, focusing instead on his own plans. In the narrator's perspective, sleep eluded him due to the pain in his foot, worsened by the adrenaline coursing through him. He realized he needed to remain hidden long enough for suspicion to arise about his absence. With strict sleeping schedules in place, it was unlikely anyone would oversleep, and he feared being blamed for Ida's fate. He contemplated the possibility of being mistaken for a villain and the implications that would have on his future. Determined to avoid suspicion, the narrator crawled under his bed, quickly emerging and sneezing from the dust. He reflected on how silly it was to have once feared monsters lurking beneath his bed. The rent was high these days, making it hard to afford even a tiny space. Dust collected under the bed, and lying down on the highway seemed more appealing. However, for the sake of a plan, it was necessary to lie next to the bed monster. Before that, a shirt from Ida would do well to wipe away the dust. Surely he wouldn't mind. As the thought crossed my mind, I remembered Ida was no longer with us. I settled under the bed, wrapped in a blanket like a sleeping bag. It was uncomfortable but essential for my scheme. When I finally woke up, I realized I hadn't fed Kirishima. In a rush, I dashed to the kitchen, grabbed a frozen pizza and a bottle of water, and hurried to the weapon cellar. I knocked on the door with urgency, calling out in a deep voice, urging Kirishima to wake up or risk starving. Pushing the frozen pizza under the door, I made sure it was far enough in so it wouldn't just sit by the entrance. I then let the water flow under the door, knowing he would have to lick it from the ground. It wasn't a 5-star meal, but it was all I could offer. After locking everything up, I returned to my room, closed the door, and crawled back under the bed, waiting for someone to come. Shiro's voice broke through the silence, expressing concern over my absence and the possibility of Aizawa-sensei being angry. He called out for Ida, panic rising in his tone. I could sense his frantic breaths as he searched for answers. When I finally crawled out from under the bed, I noticed Shiro's worried expression. He had thought I had been kidnapped. I explained my reasoning for hiding under the bed, given the recent events where others had been harmed in their sleep. Shiro acknowledged that it was a sound idea, especially with Ida gone. The realization hit me hard. Ida was dead, and I had been blissfully unaware while sleeping. I decided to gather the others, rushing out to find everyone gathered around a body. The scene was somber, and I announced the grim news. Sir Night-Eye confirmed it was the second murder. And the lady inquired about the identity of the victim, and I relayed the tragic news about Ida. Aizawa-sensei appeared stressed, likely contemplating why he hadn't targeted me first, given the obvious signs of foul play. Tsu questioned how I had survived, and I explained my logic. I had hidden under the bed, hoping the murderer hadn't seen me. Aizawa-sensei looked at me with confusion, and I felt the weight of my deception. It would have been easy to betray him, but I managed to weave a lie that kept suspicion away from me. As the chaos settled, I pondered Aizawa-sensei's thoughts. Kirishima was the main suspect, and I wondered if Aizawa-sensei would see me as a good student or a villain. I had two options, lie or eliminate the threat. I preferred to keep my identity a secret until the end. Aizawa-sensei's gaze followed me closely, and as soon as I was alone in my dorm, he entered and locked the door behind us. The plan to eliminate him seemed thwarted by the presence of a camera. He confronted me directly, acknowledging that we both knew the truth. I feigned innocence, smiling warmly and maintaining eye contact. Aizawa-sensei accused me of lying, but I turned the accusation back on him, suggesting he had been careless in revealing his identity. Our conversation turned tense as I expressed my desire for action rather than betrayal. I revealed my true intentions, admitting that I had known about the situation for much longer than I let on. Aizawa-sensei was taken aback, questioning if I was the villain. I dismissed the notion, claiming that if I were truly the villain, everyone would already be gone. I explained my capabilities, hinting at my ability to eliminate anyone in my way without breaking the rules. Aizawa-sensei looked horrified as he grabbed my shirt and my arm, demanding to know the identity of the second villain. I warned him against crossing me, suggesting it would be a mistake to stand in my way. Aizawa-sensei challenged me, and in a swift motion, I kicked him in the kneecaps, ready to take control of the situation. As I ducked and dodged his punch, I managed to rip my hand free from his grip. I leaped to one side of the room and pulled out a gun, aiming it directly at him. Aizawa-sensei sighed, expressing his disapproval by stating that this would get me kicked out of the game as well. I acknowledged that it was just my method of buying time, allowing me enough distance from him. He seemed reluctant to ask why, and I shrugged it off, saying it didn't matter. However, I noted that it would be nice to answer him before I eliminated him from the game. I retrieved his dagger, which he always kept hidden in his shoe. Aizawa-sensei questioned how I had gotten it, and I replied that I had stolen it while he wasn't paying attention. I warned him to take better care of his weapons, as if someone recognized the knife at a crime scene, it would lead directly back to him. He asked for clarification, but he didn't have time to ponder my words as I pressed the dagger against my hip. I wondered why I always seemed to end up hurt in my plans. Aizawa-sensei quickly grasped the implication. If I ran out screaming with the dagger in my side, everyone would assume he was the murderer, and he would be accused of a crime he hadn't committed. Nezu observed the unfolding chaos with interest. More and more students were arriving injured, and he enjoyed watching the tactics they employed as hostility grew among them. The game was becoming increasingly intense, and new faces were appearing. However, he never expected Midoriya to take such a drastic action. Recovery Girl, who had just returned from tending to numerous students, was furious when she witnessed Midoriya plunge the knife into his side. She vowed to confront him if she got the chance. Present Mike expressed his disbelief at what Aizawa was teaching his students, while Luch Rush hoped it wasn't about eliminating people unnoticed. Nezu found the situation thrilling, but Recovery Girl warned him that it wouldn't be exciting for long. Just then, Midoriya's screams echoed through the hall, filled with raw emotion, fear, pain, and panic. Todoroki questioned how such actions were allowed, and I admitted that I hadn't written any rules against it. I was clever, but I never expected something like this to happen. It was as absurd as expecting a pink elephant to fly. Endeavor, visibly upset, declared that Midoriya was a villain, and if he ever attempted world domination, he would be the first to warn everyone. I remarked that if Midoriya did try that, I would gladly assist him. Endeavor turned pale at my words, and I couldn't help but smirk. Present Mike speculated that Midoriya might not even feel the pain, while Recovery Girl noted that he hadn't screamed until later. Midoriya was now at the door, banging and screaming. Several heroes and students rushed to his aid, while Aizawa appeared deep in thought, trying to piece together the events that had transpired. Present Mike felt sympathy for Aizawa, but the door burst open, revealing several heroes. Midoriya lay crumpled on the floor in a small pool of blood, with some students rushing to him, others screaming, and one fainting. Midnight accused him of being a villain, but Present Mike insisted there was no excuse not to help him. Ectoplasm pointed out that he had been caught with bloody hands, despite not having committed the act. Endeavor was outraged, questioning what kind of lessons were being taught at the school, as all he saw was chaos. Todoroki revealed that Midoriya had given him the gun and encouraged him to shoot Endeavor, claiming it would have been satisfying regardless of the circumstances. Endeavor had to be restrained from reacting violently. Kaminari questioned who Midoriya had become, while Recovery Girl reminded him that he was still a classmate. I clarified that Kaminari was asking about Midoriya's true character, as the person they knew was different from the one appearing on screen now. Kaminari pointed out an empty corner, claiming Midoriya had challenged him to overload an electrical socket. Hawks inquired if Aizawa had done this to his own students, and Aizawa raised his hands, blood dripping from them due to Midoriya's earlier actions. I found the situation darkly amusing. Midoriya had committed a crime, yet it wasn't entirely his fault, leaving him in a morally ambiguous position. A fight broke out as Aizawa used his scarf to subdue two students while retrieving the weapon Midoriya had dropped. The scene resembled a real battle, though the weapons were non-lethal. Aizawa created chaos before someone finally managed to bring him down, and he was eventually voted out of the game. Later, I found myself in my dorm, having argued for a long time to remain in the game and to bandage my wound myself. I stood there with a knife in my hip, stubbornly insisting on my decision. The argument would have continued if not for the concern of others. I was prepared for any outcome. The dagger barely touched my hip. I wrapped it in plastic and taped a balloon filled with blood to the spot where the knife had pierced me, ensuring it was just a small puncture wound. Only then did I notice the camera beside me, which had almost fallen to the floor. It was clearly being used. I acknowledged that it wasn't pleasant to watch someone change clothes, especially when it was live on camera, and questioned if it was really that unexpected. I already have enough injuries and don't want to bleed out. I needed to devise new strategies to survive this game without falling victim to my own plan. The camera still hadn't managed to get back in order. With a clap, I crushed the camera between my hands, letting it drop to the ground before stepping on it. Suddenly, I heard a knock at the door. Hawks asked if I was all right. I assured him I was fine, but the door was locked. I needed to finish everything quickly or risk being caught. I began to unwrap the plastic, feeling the pressure in my stomach. Hawks expressed his concern, worried I might have fainted and bled out. I insisted I was okay, but I was frustrated with myself for forgetting the bandages outside. This was suspicious. I had told them I could handle my injuries. Hawks mentioned he was there to bring the bandages and offered help. I declined, claiming my wound wasn't as bad as it seemed. He reminded me that I had been in pain on the floor, and I could tell he was genuinely worried. To prevent him from entering, I pushed Ida's bed in front of the door. It wouldn't hold him back for long, but it was better than nothing. I remembered the injury on my leg, which added to my discomfort. The strain of moving was becoming unbearable. As I struggled, I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me, and I stumbled to the ground, the weight of my body feeling heavier than ever. Hawks called out, concerned for my well-being. I quickly reassured him, though my voice betrayed my pain. He insisted I needed help, sensing something was off. In a moment of panic, I realized it might have been a mistake to try to get up while talking to him. I hastily removed the plastic wrap from my body. I explained that I didn't like being seen covered in blood. Hawks asked if it was that bad, and I could hear the hero tone in his voice, which made me anxious. I noticed his feathers creeping under the door, trying to reach the lock. Before they could, I grabbed one, wincing as it cut into my hands. I took his feather, opened the window, and tossed it out before closing it again. Then, I stuffed a blanket into the door crack to block any view. Days passed without sleep or proper food. I devised a simple trick, moving each clock forward by 1 hour and 20 minutes. If people woke up too late, they would be in danger. Every alarm clock was set to this time. I didn't want to simply turn off the bracelets like last time. I craved variety. So, I snuck through the dorms at night, finding every clock or alarm. Some students had multiple alarms, while others had complicated codes. I managed to change them all, but navigating the heroes' rooms was tricky, especially with Hawk's feathers everywhere. The next morning, I stepped out of my dorm. Only a few classmates were awake, along with some heroes. I wasn't surprised to see so many heroes up early. Now came the second stage of my plan, leaving an anonymous note in the fridge that I had poisoned some food. Anyone who ate it would slowly succumb to the effects, while those who chose to stay in the game without an antidote would face real danger. I hid the note well, hoping it wouldn't be discovered immediately. As we all went about our day, unaware of each other's actions, the announcement came. Nezu declared that only a select few students would remain in the game, while some heroes were eliminated for sleeping too long. Hawks questioned the timing, confused about the situation. Momo realized that we had all survived because we had woken up on time, despite thinking it was early. Kaken expressed his frustration, furious at the villain for playing dirty. He should be fighting us openly, not quietly and secretly taking everyone out with loopholes. Come on, face us, you coward. After a while of cursing back and forth, someone covered my ears. Eventually, we all went to eat until someone shouted after finding a note. A meeting was immediately called to decide who would go and who wouldn't. Momo expressed her intention to go, believing it was for the best. If there was poison involved, she didn't want to take any chances. Leaving the game voluntarily seemed better than risking serious injury. I questioned whether it might just be a bluff, but Hound Dog agreed that it was better not to take risks. I pointed out that if we all left the game, we might realize too late that it was just a bluff. Best Jeanist reassured us that there were enough heroes with poison tolerance, so not everyone needed to leave. The meeting was likely only for those without that tolerance. Hawks then had an idea and pointed at Hound Dog, suggesting he could use his sense of smell to check for poison in the fridge and on the plates. Hound Dog protested, insisting that having an animal quirk didn't make him a dog. I decided I wasn't going to participate, which Hawks seemed to expect. Kaken declared he was better than the rest and would stay too. Shinso thought it was all just a bluff, while Mei claimed that after inhaling so many toxic gases from her failed experiments, a bit of poison was nothing to her. In the end, the other students and some heroes chose to leave. Izuku's perspective shifted as he prepared to put his plan into action. He knew this last step could lead to his demise, but he was determined. The plan involved getting on Kaken's nerves and provoking him into a rage, which he found amusing. While he was deep in thought about how to execute this, Hawks tried to convince him to leave the game, repeating warnings about the dangers. Hawks insisted it was too risky and that he would die if he continued. After an hour of this, Izuku realized there was a simple way to make Hawks stop talking. He went into the kitchen, mixed a glass of water with salt, and turned to Hawks, who was still following him with the same arguments. With a mischievous thought, Izuku downed the salt water. Hawks was taken aback, and Izuku hurried to the trash can to vomit. He felt a sense of satisfaction at having silenced Hawks, who expressed his dismay at the situation and declared he never wanted to have children. Snipe then approached Izuku, asking if he had a gun. Izuku confirmed he did, having modified one for special occasions. Snipe asked to borrow it, and Izuku handed over the rigged gun, pointing it at him. Just as Snipe took it, it unexpectedly discharged, hitting him in the face. Hawks rushed over, along with others nearby, while Izuku apologized profusely, claiming it was an accident. He feigned sorrow, hoping the witnesses would see that Snipe had been holding the gun when it fired. With Snipe taken away, Izuku turned his attention to Kaken, waiting for the right moment to taunt him. He whispered to Kaken about his inability to protect his friends, which ignited Kaken's fury. Kaken shouted in response, demanding to know if Izuku was looking down on him. Izuku, speaking loudly enough for others to hear, denied it, but then whispered that Kaken couldn't compare to him, suggesting even a chihuahua might have a better chance in a fight. Kaken's anger escalated, and he unleashed a series of explosions. Izuku continued to provoke him, whispering that even the heroes saw him as a dog, which only fueled Kaken's rage further. Kaken shouted that he didn't care about anyone and that Izuku's only purpose was to stand in his way. In a fit of anger, Kaken pushed Izuku, sending him crashing against the window, which shattered. It wasn't a high fall, just from the second floor, but it was enough to cause some injuries. Izuku thought to himself that 10 days wouldn't be enough for all his wounds to heal properly. And many of them kept opening, requiring me to stitch them all back together. That was the moment when everything burst open. I lay there in a pool of my own blood, likely having broken my ankle when I fell from the second floor. But I was still alive. Nezu reflected on the situation. The big question was whether Bakugo was a hero or a villain. If he was the villain, he could stay. If not, he would have to be removed from the game. Most likely, Kirishima was the villain since he had disappeared without a trace, leaving everyone else in the room that day. However, Nezu couldn't know for sure. If he allowed Bakugo to stay and it turned out he was the villain, Nezu would have to send him back, raising suspicion among the others. But they would be suspicious anyway if he didn't call him out, considering someone had been harmed. The dilemma was whether to eliminate Bakugo or not. He probably wasn't the villain, he would have shown it by now. Nezu spoke into the speaker, informing Bakugo that he needed to leave the game for having harmed another hero, which was against the rules. Bakugo responded defiantly, claiming his target deserved it. Nezu questioned how anyone could deserve to be thrown out of a window and pointed out the rules that had been broken. Midoriya interjected, stating he was fine and that Bakugo didn't need to be removed since he hadn't harmed him. Recovery Girl insisted that Bakugo should leave the game before he faced dire consequences. Nezu whispered to the others that they shouldn't threaten to kill, especially since everyone was watching the live broadcast. Midoriya maintained that he needed to take care of something before leaving the game. Izuku decided to re-enter the fray, limping as he approached the others. The shock on their faces was palpable, especially from Hawks, who looked as if he might panic. Miriko and Midnight seemed ready to confront Bakugo themselves if he didn't leave willingly. Izuku knew he had to create space for the players, much like chess pieces, to utilize their full potential, which meant he had to remove some pieces from the board. He pulled out a gun in front of Bakugo, stating that they both had to leave the game now. Bakugo called him sick, reminding him of the time he had been thrown through a window. Izuku warned that if Bakugo wanted to pull him down, he would ensure they both fell. Without giving Bakugo a chance to react, he pulled the trigger, and Bakugo fell to the front. Izuku noted that they both had to leave the game, but it didn't matter to him. After 10 days without sleep, he felt he could finally rest. Perhaps it was a cold-hearted act, but wasn't revenge best served cold? The room fell silent as everyone stared at him. He expressed that he was simply done suffering. He stood there while Ectoplasm carried Bakugo, whistling a cheerful tune as he left his explosive surprise behind. Izuku thought that many might believe this was the end. After reading a thick book for 10 days without sleep, he wouldn't let himself be thrown out due to his own foolishness and desire for revenge. It was impossible for him to be kicked out of the game since one could only be officially out after scanning the roll card received at the beginning. No one exited the game simply by having a button pressed on their bracelet. As he left the fake city with Ectoplasm and approached the scanner, a smile crept onto his face. While it appeared pleasant on the surface, the smile inside him was anything but. He wasn't foolish enough to scan his villain card. Instead, he planned to stay until his little gift was discovered. He pulled out a card that wasn't his own, having previously kidnapped Kirishima and taken his card. Since it didn't specify who it was meant for, he intended to use it to reach the other eliminated players. He was out of the game without truly leaving, playing from the outside. Kirishima's card would ensure he was considered out without having actually exited. The thrill of it all excited him, and he couldn't wait to reveal the truth. Ida expressed concern for Midoriya, astonished that he had truly been thrown out of the window. Bakugo protested, claiming he wasn't the villain, as he had been shot. Nezu questioned why Izuku had chosen such a path when he could have simply exited the game, allowing Bakugo to be removed due to his actions. Izuku replied that his method was far more satisfying. Nezu observed that Izuku seemed like a different person than the one they had known, as if his mask had fallen away to reveal his true self. He extended a hand toward Izuku, who requested a few hours of rest before engaging in conversation, having not slept in 10 long days since the game began. He needed sleep. The confusion in my mind was overwhelming, and I felt I would reveal everything if asked. Nezu commented on the duration of my condition, saying it reminded him of someone. Aizawa, with a serious tone, dismissed the idea that his lack of sleep would lead him to harm anyone for amusement. I asserted that I didn't appear homeless. Mike-sensei laughed heartily, and before I could say anything I might regret, I lay flat on the floor, succumbing to sleep. I had been running on adrenaline for days, and it felt good to finally rest before facing the ultimate challenge ahead. Nezu observed that Kaomi Woods was still alive, while I noted that my energy had faded. Tsu acknowledged that staying awake for over 10 days was quite an accomplishment, to which Bakugo boasted that he could stay awake much longer if he chose to. Recovery Girl warned him that she would use her cane on him if he even thought about disturbing Midoriya's rest. Aizawa picked Bakugo up to take him to the infirmary, pausing thoughtfully. I asked what was on his mind, and he remarked on how light Bakugo felt, suggesting he might be underweight. Ochako speculated that Midoriya hadn't eaten much either. Midoriya stirred slightly in his sleep, and I cautioned everyone not to say his name while he was resting, as it could provoke a stronger reaction than other words. Midoriya shifted again, clutching Aizawa's scarf tightly, his head nestled against Aizawa's chest. Aizawa simply watched him, perhaps even smiling softly. I called out to Aizawa, but received no response. I tried again, and he finally acknowledged me, promising to take Midoriya to the infirmary immediately. When I eventually woke up, I found myself on a makeshift bed of pillows and blankets, surrounded by other contestants who had been eliminated or never entered the game. I yawned and Ochako greeted me, confirming that I had slept for 2 whole days. Panic set in as I remembered I had forgotten to feed Kirishima. I decided it was time to use the bomb. It was better than doing nothing, or Kirishima might not survive. My eyes were glued to the screen as I counted down from 10. Ochako remarked on my recklessness as I reached 0 and pulled the trigger from my pocket. Everyone watching jumped back in shock, but I remained still. The drones filming from the house were all destroyed simultaneously, the loud noise causing everyone to flinch. A new set of cameras was sent by Nezu, and we all stared at the screen, which revealed the house reduced to rubble. Hawk was seen using his remaining feathers for support, looking worse for wear, while Mei waved at the camera before pressing a button on her bracelet, her arm in an awkward position. Shinso leaned against a stone, nearly unconscious. The atmosphere was tense, but I couldn't help but laugh, a chilling, unsettling laugh that sent shivers down everyone's spines. Aizawa commented that he hadn't known anyone could laugh in such a disturbing manner. I then revealed that Kirishima was not the villain. Nezu questioned who else it could be, doubting that a villain would blow up the building with themselves. I explained that Kirishima had been locked away by the villain and was on a strict diet until now. Aizawa expressed skepticism about how any of the remaining contestants could be heroes, suggesting the villain must be among them. I clarified that I had researched the rules thoroughly and discovered a loophole. I explained that while heroes are eliminated for killing teammates, villains are not eliminated for killing heroes. This meant that if a villain killed a hero, they could use a hero's card to remain in the game and act from outside. Nezu found my theory intriguing, and I continued, stating that the second important rule allowed someone to return to the game if they were called without breaking any rules. This meant that actions taken in the observation room, such as fainting or healing, did not count as part of the game. Therefore, the villain could be among us. Nezu acknowledged my clever strategy, and Endeavor questioned if one of us was indeed the villain. I revealed that I had been the last eliminated for killing others. After being pushed out of the window, I had to act quickly to avoid fainting and being eliminated. I admitted to shooting Bakugo in front of everyone, which led to my elimination. I had fainted in the observation room and was healed. The card I scanned was not mine but Kirishima's, as my actual card was the villain card. Since I had fallen in the observation room, I was not considered defeated, merely temporarily out of the game. I pulled out my villain card, and the room fell silent, everyone in shock. Aizawa questioned why I had to kick him out, to which I replied that he had been in my way, though he had his own share of eliminations. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and Nezu commended me for keeping my identity a secret until now. Most people would need a few more hours to digest the information. The suggestion of playing a game of chess was met with a firm refusal from Recovery Girl. The protagonist, still needing to clean up the game field, retrieved a weapon from their bag and left the observation room while whistling a tune. In the aftermath of the explosions, 2 students, Mei and Shinso, had been eliminated from the game, leaving only 5 heroes remaining. The protagonist had not yet revealed who had been thrown out or who had sustained injuries. The focus now shifted to the remaining heroes, and a decision had to be made about which 3 heroes should be removed from the game. The protagonist encouraged others to vote on who should survive and who should not, emphasizing the importance of reasoning behind their choices. As the story continued, a new arc began to unfold involving Aizawa, Midnight, and Present Mike, who had turned to the dark side. Many students expressed their sadness over the departure of these 3 teachers, struggling with their emotions. Izuku, however, faced a different kind of turmoil. The only teachers who had treated him with kindness, despite his quirkless status, were now villains. All Might had wanted to train him, but Aizawa had always held him back from injury. With Aizawa now gone, All Might pushed Izuku beyond his limits. In his grief, Izuku chose not to seek help from Recovery Girl, allowing the pain to serve as a constant reminder of his inadequacy. He buried his feelings deep inside, determined to appear strong and capable. On a rooftop, Izuku found himself reflecting on his circumstances. He decided to put away the guns, realizing that shooting was not who he was. Instead, he wandered through the area, observing the remnants of destruction until he reached the remaining heroes. Midnight was using her quirk on Shinso, while Hawks rested against a stone, clearly in need of a break after using his feathers to support himself. Midnight reassured Hawks that everything would be fine, urging him to close his eyes and rest. Hawks expressed his frustration towards the person responsible for the chaos. Just then, the protagonist arrived, commenting on the unexpected level of destruction that had occurred in their absence. Both Hawks and Midnight turned to face the newcomer, surprised to see them. The protagonist explained that they had found a loophole in the game, allowing them to re-enter the field. Midnight was astonished, questioning how it was possible given the strict rules outlined in the rulebook. The protagonist noted that while the rules were comprehensive, some details had been overlooked. Hawks confirmed that only the three of them remained, despite the chaos that had unfolded. The protagonist speculated that the villain was likely still alive, as it would be foolish for them to have blown themselves up along with everyone else. Midnight hoped for an increase in their numbers, while the protagonist emphasized the need for at least two of them to survive in order to defeat the villain. The discussion turned to strategy, with Midnight suggesting they split up to cover more ground and reduce their vulnerability. Hawks opposed the idea, likening it to the poor decisions made in horror movies. However, Midnight argued that staying together did not guarantee safety, and the protagonist supported her reasoning. Ultimately, Hawks conceded that splitting into two groups might be the best course of action. Hawks suggested that he would go alone while Midnight and Izuku would stick together. Midnight questioned why that was the case. Hawks explained that he was injured but could use his feathers for support and speed. He noted that Midnight, while injured too, could benefit from Midoriya's help to walk. They had no weapons other than Hawk's feathers, which could potentially harm her. He mentioned that using her mist could provide some protection for both of them. Izuku and Midnight began to move, with Midnight leaning on him and breathing heavily. Izuku asked if she was okay, and she admitted that she felt she had lost too much blood. He suggested they search for a lighter in the rubble, explaining that it could help stop her bleeding. Midnight expressed concern that it would leave scars, and Izuku offered that she could leave him behind to continue alone. Midnight insisted that he find the lighter. Izuku searched through the debris for a while Midnight attempted to make bandages from scraps of her clothes. After a long search, he found a lighter that didn't work and decided to try a different method. He struck two stones together to create a spark, using scraps of his clothes and pieces of wood to start a fire. He approached Midnight with a chair leg that he had set ablaze, telling her it should work. Midnight was startled at the sight of the flame and questioned if she had to hold it over her wounds. Izuku confirmed that was the idea. As he held a small pebble in his hand, he noticed something behind them and threw the stone to distract whatever was there. Midnight turned around, alarmed, and Izuku warned her that he thought someone was nearby. Midnight instructed him to stay behind her and called out for whoever was there to reveal themselves. Silence followed, prompting Izuku to throw another stone in a different direction. Midnight warned that it was her last warning before she began to create mist that led toward where the stone had fallen. Izuku noted that the wind was moving the mist toward him, making it easier to conceal himself. He commented on Midnight's choice of materials for her suit, suggesting that it was a poor decision given her quirk. Midnight replied that it was a risk she had to take to use her abilities effectively. Izuku continued, explaining that the fabric of her suit was not only cloth but also plastic and other materials that made it thin yet durable. He pointed out that many of those materials were highly flammable. Midnight dismissed his comments, insisting they should focus on their immediate danger. Izuku argued that they couldn't be sure if the person they sensed was a villain or a survivor. Midnight insisted that the player would have shown themselves by now, and they were outnumbered. Izuku reminded her that the villain had to be a student, which Midnight questioned. He explained that he had found a loophole in the game, revealing that he had killed someone without being eliminated. Midnight was shocked and asked why he had blamed Shota if they were both villains. Izuku revealed that he had faked his injury to mislead others. He explained that Shota had been in his way, and now only Midnight and Hawks stood between him and his goals. Midnight struggled to comprehend his actions, and Izuku confirmed that it had all been a facade. He expressed disappointment in her for not heeding his warning about the flammability of her mist. He then threw the torch into the mist, and the flames erupted dramatically, causing Midnight to scream. Izuku found a twisted satisfaction in the chaos, but then noticed a small dot approaching them, revealing it to be Hawks. Izuku wiped tears from his face as he watched the fire with a mix of fear and excitement. He felt his knees tremble, but he remained close to the flames, hoping to evoke a sense of trauma. He worried that Hawks might discover his role in starting the fire, but he hoped that Hawks' hero instincts would kick in upon seeing the smoke and hearing Midnight's screams. As cameras surrounded the scene, Izuku felt the pressure mounting. Hawks arrived and asked what was happening. Izuku feigned innocence, claiming that Midnight had caught fire unexpectedly. Hawks looked at the flames, contemplating the situation. He expressed concern that if he rushed into the fire without a plan, it could lead to tragedy, especially if Midnight were to perish. Izuku realized he had pushed things too far, and in the distance, he spotted several heroes, including Todoroki, approaching. He freezes the entire fire. A few heroes cast pitying or perhaps hopeful glances at Hawks. It's clear they believe victory is out of reach. The only remaining players are me and Hawks, and if he eliminates me, he will also lose the game. Kirishima is still in the mix, but he has already been eliminated. Nezu announces that we can continue the game. Hawks expresses his regret, noting that while we play, Midnight is suffering. I suggest that finishing the game quickly might lessen the pain. Hawks and I navigate the ruins, but we can't enter the houses of the fake city. Anyone who remains outside for more than 3 days, whether hero or villain, can be eliminated without consequences. If we leave the hero agency, Hawks will win if he manages to take me out. Hawks thinks it might be better to exit the field, but I see a silver lining. The villain must be nearby since there was an attack on Midnight, and they can't be absent from the playing field for too long without risking elimination. If we leave, we could be ambushed, but it's clear the villain is here. If Kirishima was the villain voted out long ago and is now on the run, my reasoning might be flawed. But for now, we stay put. Hawks suddenly points to an intact armory that resembles a bunker. He moves quickly, despite his injuries, and reaches the door. When he finds it locked, he expresses frustration, noting that it should have survived the explosion. I kneel and wipe the dirt off the key I found on the ground. Hawks snatches it from my hand and opens the door, revealing an array of weapons. I wonder aloud why someone would possess so many and if the villain had access to them, hoping he doesn't realize I have the same model. Hawks shrugs, and I notice a second door. He limps over to it, managing to slip a feather through the gap to unlock it from the inside. When the door opens, we hear a hissing sound and see Kirishima, pale and with dark circles under his eyes. Kirishima accuses Hawks of locking him up, and Hawks is taken aback, realizing Kirishima is not the villain. Kirishima explains he has been trapped for days, surviving on water and frozen pizza pushed through a crack in the door. Hawks turns away, contemplating the implications. If Kirishima isn't the villain and has been imprisoned, that leaves only one possibility: I must be the villain. In an instant, I draw my knife and stab it into his hip. Hawks looks down in shock at the blade protruding from his side. I taunt him, questioning his speed and mocking his status as the fastest hero. Hawks collapses to the ground, and I press the button on his bracelet. Nezu declares the game over, announcing that the villain team, consisting of Aizawa and me, has won, with me as the sole survivor. A smile spreads across my face, one that feels far from psychopathic. Afterward, events unfold quickly. Hawks and Midnight are taken to the hospital, where Recovery Girl does her best to help them. Most of the others keep their distance from me. I hum a quiet tune while waiting on a bench outside the room where Hawks is being treated. I don't engage much with anyone. As I sit there, I hear Aizawa and Mike each occupying a side of the bench. I wonder if I have enough time to slip away unnoticed. Mike asks if I really pulled it off, and I confirm that I did. Aizawa agrees, but the atmosphere is tense and quiet, punctuated only by the hurried footsteps of hospital staff. Aizawa notes that I don't look happy, and I respond that I have no reason to be. I reflect on my actions, feeling no better than Kaken, who has also faced scrutiny. Aizawa points out that I only eliminated 2 people on live television, and I lament that my worst actions are now public knowledge. Mike asks if that's why I'm upset, but I clarify that I regret what I did. It was barbaric to blow up a building full of people, and I had reveled in the chaos. Somewhere along the way, I lost my sanity, especially when I locked up Kirishima. I question when exactly I crossed that line. Aizawa asks why I acted that way if I feel remorse. I explain that sometimes people do things they regret, and I didn't think through the consequences. I had planned meticulously but became so consumed by the thrill of the game that I lost sight of everything else. I didn't just eliminate Hawks quietly, I did it right in front of him. Mike tries to console me, but Aizawa bluntly states that I slipped too deeply into my role. He reassures me that both Hawks and Midnight will survive, suggesting that a little trauma isn't the end of the world. Mike counters that it does hurt people, and Aizawa, frustrated, retorts that he's trying to uplift spirits while Mike is making it harder. Mike recalls a time when Nem was upset about a potential scar, and Aizawa had tried to lighten the mood, which only made things worse. I can't help but chuckle at the memory, but Mike points out that since the game ended, I've been moping around as if Hawks and Midnight were gone for good. Finally, the familiar smile returned, a sight that had been absent since an unfortunate incident involving a series of plates. The protagonist felt a wave of relief wash over them. Apologies were exchanged, and the teachers acknowledged the lessons learned from the recent game. Aizawa-sensei inquired about the protagonist's parents, mentioning that Nezu had granted all students permission to leave for 3 days following the recent distressing events. The protagonist explained that their mother was busy with work, and when asked about their father, they expressed a shared curiosity about his whereabouts. Aizawa-sensei's expression softened as he processed the revelation of the protagonist's father leaving. Mike-sensei, ever the optimist, suggested that since it was late, they could offer a ride home. The protagonist declined, wanting to wait for news about Hawks and Midnight. Aizawa-sensei reassured them that it wasn't necessary to wait, while Mike-sensei insisted that it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The protagonist, realizing the rarity of such an experience, reconsidered. Aizawa-sensei promised that they would be the first to know if there were any updates about Hawks and Midnight. As Aizawa and present Mike attempted to coax the protagonist into the car, they felt a lingering sense of being watched, a reminder that Nezu was always keeping an eye on things. Chapter end. The author decided to change the book cover to something different. If readers notice the new image, they should not assume it is a different story. The chosen picture depicts a character wearing a mask, symbolizing his role as a villain. Without the mask, he appears to be just a smiling child. However, upon closer inspection, it becomes evident that even the smiling child has traces of blood on his hands and face.